In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. Glory be to him, and his grace and mercy be upon us forever. Amen. Holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty, by whose glory the heaven and earth are filled, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who has come, and is to come in the name of the Lord, glory in the highest. Holy art thou, O God, holy art thou, Almighty, holy art thou, immortal, crucified for us, have mercy on us. Holy art thou, O God, holy art thou, Almighty, holy art thou, immortal. Crucify for us, have mercy on us. Holy art thou, God, holy art thou, Almighty, holy art thou, immortal. Crucify for us, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy upon us. Lord, we cannot have mercy. Lord, accept our service and our prayers. Have mercy upon us. Glory be to you, God. Glory be to your Creator. Glory be to your Christ, the King, whose compassion on sinful servants, Barak more. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts and sins, as we also forgiven our debtors. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Peace be with you, Mary, full of grace. Our Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. Blessed the fruit of your womb, our Lord Jesus Christ. O Virgin Saint Mary, O Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at all times at the hour of our death. Amen. O thou full of mercy, renew thy creation, thy resurrection. O Lord, comfort us all the departed ones who die with hope in thee and await thy coming. O Lord, make them dwell in the bosom of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May the living and the departed together cry out, Blessed is he who has come and has come and give life to the dead. Amen. O Holy Father, guard us by your sacred name. O Son of God, our Savior, protect us of the victorious cross. O Holy Spirit, make us worthy temples of your holy habitations. O Lord our God, forever. Shelter us in divine wings at all times, forever and ever. Amen. Body Kumar Christ God, may you bless this last class of our Divyabodhanam, a class on the book of the growing church. May you help and guide us as your as students to remember to learn all the lessons from the histories of our church, the history of our church, learning from all of our ancestors and elders who have come before, to help to continue to build up a church that is strong and that pleases your will. May we continue to remember all the struggles and difficulties that our church endured, but also being remembering that, especially during this great Lenten season, we're called to move forward always toward your holy cross, that through trials and tribulations, through the struggles that we have in this life, we're always coming closer to you, that you help us by your grace and your mercy, and through our prayers, our fasting, our adorations, and all the offices that we offer unto you. May we continue to bring our families, our children, our church, and all peoples closer to you in all ways, that your light will continue to lighten our paths and help us to follow after your holy will, both now and always and forever and ever. Amen. Okay, so hopefully today's our last class. I'm trying to hopefully complete everything. And as I look at we've finished I'll do the last lesson from the previous unit, Unit 3, and then we'll go into Unit 4. A lot of it, especially when I was going through Unit 4, is repetitive. The VC Samuel Achen, as he wrote this book, this last unit, it's just building on this idea about the history, about the different difficulties between the different Catholic and then the Dutch, and he doesn't get into the British. So I think it's a separate book, but the coming of the British, and then all the different not the figures, important figures in different ways in each of the lessons. They just kind of add up on each other, talking about the incidents. And sometimes, even when I'm reading it, some places it's kind of confusing because it's going back and forth. It gets to one point, then the next lesson goes back again, but adds more people or gives more detail in a different way. And so hopefully I'll just kind of give the highlights and main points, and then we'll be able to wrap up this book for the Divyabodhanam class. If I'm not mistaken, right, Alex, we're on lesson 6, right, of Unit 3. I'm just going to go through that quickly and then start on Unit 4.
That's right, Acha. That is right.
Okay. Actually, let me pull that up here. Hold on. Where's that? Okay. Well, I'm not going to. All of you have the book, right? And so I'm not going to pull it up because I'm not going to necessarily go through so many lessons. Well, I'll have it ready though. But hold on, let me just click on here. 105. There we go. Okay, so this lesson, lesson 6 of Unit 3 talks about the political conditions of Kerala in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, and also that's pretty much what Unit 4 talks about, all that in detail. Main thing, this lesson 6 kind of sets us up for Unit 4. The main thing is talking about first and foremost, it begins with the realities in Kerala. I'm born and raised here. I didn't take, even when I studied church history, I don't know the history of the kingdoms of that make up what is current day Kerala. But the main thing is, we know that Kerala, as we know today, was not one country or one kingdom. It was small little, kingdoms and um, uh, places, or regions that are under a certain king or prince or whatnot, fiefdoms, you might say. Sorry. And then, so there are three main kings, as he mentions. There was in India, not just Kerala, but in Calicut and Kannur, and then Travancore. And so this is when we begin with the Portuguese, and now the rise of the Dutch. We see that these kings were not playing, but the political game of which side of these foreign powers that are coming from Europe, who do you side with? And so that's what this lesson is highlighting, how when the Dutch come and now there's a difference, the Portuguese are trying to maintain control. Each of these, the Dutch and the Portuguese, are trying to find favor with these local kings and in these local kingdoms, which we know as today's Kerala, or at least South India. And so based on which kingdom or how favorable it was, it showed how much work they're able to do in their spice trade and in the trade trade they're trying to do, but at the same time controlling the local people. And particularly in this book, we're trying to highlight the Christian community in Kerala. So as it begins, the king of Cochin, though he was not one of the main kings at the time, as Achen writes in the lesson, he was not one of the three main kings, but the king of Cochin had was favorable for the Portuguese, and they took advantage of that. And so and so they used that. So whichever king that they we could find favor with, they took use of that. But at the same time, the other kings, seeing how one group of European powers with one siding with one king, they'll get the other side to help them. So the other kings, it says, found favor, particularly the king of Calicut, Samurthi. He found a way to find favor with the Dutch, because he didn't like the king of Cochin. And so then slowly we start seeing how, as he gets more, and he was a stronger king, seeing that he's starting to has more control and more power, particularly in the region. The Dutch are able to start seize control with his help, but at the same time, Dutch were having more kind of authority and a little bit more power at that time politically in this area in India. And so it says, like, by the beginning 1600s, the Dutch are slowly coming, and by, it says, 50 years later, or about 54 years later, that they start to take control of Ceylon. They drive out the Portuguese. They capture Korlam or Ceylon in Kraganor, and then into Cochin, into Kannur. And then they become, for a time, the Dutch are able to have a decent control in Kerala, or the region we know as South India, and the Kerala part and Malabar, up and for about almost 100 years. They're there from this 1658 to about 1775. So just a little over 100 years. The Dutch have a control. And so this just shows the political realities that's happening there. The waning of the Portuguese as a political entity and control of India. The Portuguese still have an influence in the Roman Catholic dealings in Kerala, but they're no longer as a political entity as for spice trade, because of the rise of the Dutch. At the same time, as this is happening in the 18th century, so between the 1700s, as it says, the growth of Travancore. And that's why the Dutch are leaving, because this is also where the British slowly come in by the 18th century. We see that the Travancore kingdom, or the two kings of Travancore, slowly start exerting or having more power, and then they're able to, with the help of the British, drive out the Dutch. And so then that's where we see where this is going. So Travancore is growing more, and that's one of the major power players in Kerala in terms of the kingdoms that are in this area, because of the British. And so that's what drives out the Dutch. That's the main reason for understanding this, the growth of Travancore, because of their treaty or their union with the British or help of the British. Mention some of the kings. There's not much, in terms of church history. All it's talking about is uh, how all these political things that are happening. With the Tipu Sultan coming, and that he's able to be driven back by uh, the local kings of Kerala, but also with the help of the British and these European powers. And so it just shows how that the British, the reason for first Portuguese, then the Dutch, the British, all this is happening, outside of the church history part. It's happening because of other things that are happening, like the other political things are happening, like the Tipu Sultan, the rise of these different countries who are trying to make trade in Kerala. All these things have an effect on the church history, right? So that when we look at this section 5 of this lesson, that we see that by the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, South India was under Portuguese rule to begin with, and then Dutch rule, and then the British come on the second half of the 18th century, all the way until the British leave the region by the 19th century, until they completely leave by the 20th century. We know the independence of India, right? So the main thing that we see is all these foreign powers which came to Kerala, first with the Portuguese, they were Roman Catholics. The Dutch were Protestants, and so were the British. Main thing we know, the Portuguese tried to force Catholicism upon the community, while on the other hand, the Dutch did not want to enter the field of evangelism. They were just looking for trade, so they tried to maintain religious neutrality. But between the Roman Catholic Church and the independent Syrian Church, the Dutch had a preference to the Catholics because they're European connection, right? And so the Syrian Christians of Kerala were pretty much neglected. They weren't neither supported, they were not necessarily hurt, but they weren't also given strength by when the Dutch come to power. They really didn't help the church either. The church that's trying to take off this Roman yoke off of them, right? And so that's the main thing of this ending of Unit 3 of Lesson 6, and that leads us up to how there becomes two major groups of St. Thomas Christians in Kerala. The main thing is, as it highlights, as we talked about earlier, the Kunan Cross Satya, right, as he writes it as the rebellion in 1653. The Romans, because of the evangelism and the work of these Portuguese, soldiers and missionaries and all them, have put so much pressure upon the community, either by pressure because of their relationship with the kings of the area, and also because of the money and the resources that they have. And Rome itself is putting a lot of effort in making sure their people are in charge, and to bring the Christian community in Kerala or in the Malabar coast all under Rome, because that's part of their, the Roman view that all the church as a whole should be under the umbrella of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's what even how this book ends. And you'll see for this whole pretty much this lesson, especially in terms of the Roman Catholics, how a lot of it's all their reason for dealing, how they dealt with the church in India, particularly in our Malabar church or the Malankar church, is to make sure to maintain that authority, the supremacy, and to maintain that teaching of theirs, that the Roman Church should always be on top, or should be in control, I should say. And so they put all the effort in sending their bishops. So as it says, as we get to this time, there was bishops being consecrated for them. The one, as it mentions here, is the Archbishop Garcia, and who was Portuguese. But maintaining that there's a good number who were, of the community in Kerala who would not conform to the Roman Catholic fold, or would not yield to Rome. And so that's what sets us up for a split within the community. There was one community of Syrian Christians or St. Thomas Christians in Kerala, but once the arrival of the Portuguese, now there's a division, those who side with Rome, and those who don't, right? And so as Achen puts it, how did it, the question we're hoping to answer is, how did the division occur? And how did the Sexton Church, which was part of the Nestorian Church of Persia, which we talked about earlier, about Persian connection, happen to fall into communion with the church that it was so critical of the Nestorian Church than the Portuguese. Meaning, how did we then become part of the Western tradition or the Antiochian Church? Though we had such strong connection with the Persian Church, but then after this division and we're looking for help, how do we become so strongly part of the Antiochian Church? The key thing about the division, with the Kun and Krasatya, we know is this figure of Marathala. The main thing that our takeaways of this section in the history of our church, it is not really clear who this person is. It is during the time of Archbishop Garcia and Archdeacon Thomas. Archdeacon Thomas being the local, the native person who's in control of the Church of Malabar. We have an archdeacon administrator who governs the churches, and then the Roman Catholic bishop or administrator given by Rome, or deputed by Rome, in this Archbishop Garcia. So this figure comes, whose name is Atala, who comes in, and that causes, it is the impetus for this strong division, right? It's never clear, as it says, who this Atala is, even how it's spelled. In the East Syriac would have been Ayatollah, in the West Syriac would be Itiolo. In the end, there is some Syrian, a bishop from the Middle East who's coming, right? Some say they think he was the actual patriarch of Antioch, one of the Margnases, or the patriarchs who take the name Margnases. But then, as Visamlachan highlights in this chapter, it's not too clear that this person ever represented the Antiochian Church. So much so that even Patriarch Ignatius Jacob III, who lived during this past modern time, the 20th century, when he was a monk in India before becoming patriarch, he said there was no record of any patriarch of that name, Athala, or any patriarch who left the Antiochian See to come to India at that time. So then he says, they have, in this Antiochian history, there's no account of any Syrian patriarch ever leaving Syria to go to India. So then that's why we can't give too much credence or value to the thinking that this Marathala was one of the patriarchs, right? So as he said, we ignore that. There's Roman Catholic historians who will say that this Marathala was actually a Syrian Antiochian bishop, but he became a unit. So unit meaning he came under or joined Rome, right? It's kind of like we say Malankar Catholic Church, our Uniate Church. They be considered a Uniate Church. They're all the traditions are Malankar tradition like us, but other than they accept the Roman Pope as the head of the church. So and so they just accept it, right? But they get to keep the Syrian traditions. So the same when they say Uniate, so they're saying this Marathala was a Syrian Uniate and joined Rome in 1631. That's what the Roman Catholic historians say who he is. And then the reason that he joined Rome is because he lost election to become the Patriarch of Antioch. That is their view in many Roman Catholic historical documents. And so that when he leaves Syria or Antioch, they say he went to Cairo and Egypt. And then when he hears the news that the Church of Malabar, church in India, is looking for help, it's him hearing that news, that gossip. He, for some reason or somehow, he's able to pay for passes to get to Kerala and to offer himself up as I've been sent by Antioch to be the head of the church in India and to help you guys out. Whatever the case might be of how this person, this Marathala, comes or who he is, there is an account that there is a person that we now in history call as Athala came to Surat or came to India in 1652, was captured by the Portuguese and then taken to Mylapore, and they kept him in custody before taking him to Goa and trying him there, because they're always stopping any foreign bishops from trying to support the community in Kerala. And so that much, there was somebody there, at least that's in history, there's somebody that's there. And so the story about the two shamachans or seminarians who kind of go to Mylapore and here to do veneration to where the tomb of St. Thomas was. Sorry, not the tomb of St. Thomas, but they went to pilgrimage to Mylapore, and they by chance saw him there. And then they get this letter to say, give to the archdeacon. That's part of the history of our church or the oral traditions. And they take the seminarians take this letter to the archdeacon and say that he's given a letter to give you authority to be as the take charge of the church. And so that's kind of the kind of history of it. So as this is all is happening, as the news gets to this is happening, it says as now this Marthala is now transferred from Mylapore to Goa, and they're trying him, and somehow or another, it's found out that he was that he died. Some say just natural causes, some say because the Roman Catholics killed him. But as this news is happening, and people are hearing there was a Syrian bishop, and that he's in prison, and they're not letting him out, and now there's gossip or news that he might have died. All this is happening. That's when we start seeing this great commotion, and this leads to the revolt of that, as it says, or the Kuninkrā Satya of 1653, and then this is why they make this oath. V.C.M. Lachen points out here. He said the Roman Catholic historians will say the reason all these people, because they're hearing this news, this gossip, there's a Syrian bishop that's being held and possibly he got killed. They're saying whenever we made this Kuninkrā Satya, they'll say when they look at now, or as we'll see it as revisionist history, not all of them were actually understanding what happened when they're making this oath. Some said they weren't actually revolting against Rome, particularly they just didn't like Archbishop Garcia because of what he did. And so, but they still liked Roman Church because, the resources and the people and all the things that they did. And so they try to make sure there's confusion about the community, even at this Kuninkrā Satya. But we'll say all of them are making the oath to stand firm to the faith and traditions of our forefathers, our ancestors, of the Christian faith as it expressed within the Syrian or the Syriac liturgical tradition. And so in Archdeacon Thomas was the representative. He still was the central or the figure. He represented that community because he wasn't a European or foreigner. He was the highest leader that we had amongst the community. So then that leads to this, as it says in the next section, the revolt of the people. As this letter comes out, and he's saying that he's been sent to help them, and now that he's in jail or imprisoned, and then after it's find out that that he was on the boat in Cochin as it stopped, but then like I said earlier, then there's some news that found that somehow he dies or thrown into the sea for drowning, and then that leads to the Kuninkrā Satya, right? It says all those people are in there. The problem is no one really knows what the actual oath said, right? And that's why it said. That's why the Roman Catholic historians will say not all of them are actually against Rome. A lot of them just didn't like Archbishop Garcia. Some didn't like the Jesuits because he was a Jesuit. They didn't like Jesuit supremacy, and others just rejected. And then there's a group like we would say they didn't want Rome or Jesuits or anybody. They wanted to maintain the faith. And so with Marthala, the letter that he gives to someone says if he can't come now because he's in prison, he gave the authority for he's giving the authority for the Archdeacon Thomas to be considered to be as leader of the community. So we know to be the full leader because he's only a deacon, even though he's the administrator as an archdeacon and he can control what's going on in the church. But he can't make priests. He can ordain priests, and he can't consecrate the oils needed for baptisms or modern for churches and things like that. And so it says that he was given the authority to be declared as the full administrator of the church, and then the church community supported him as the full. He's the only one, not Roman rule. And now we're not looking, and we're waiting for something to happen to be fulfilling our charge. And it says, since Marthala was now taken away, it says amongst this group of 4 priests, and then their names as is Parambal Chandi, Bengor Givagis, Kadaval Chandi, and Anjamurtal Iti Tumen. These are, my understanding, these are all Kathanars, or they're all priests to be supporting this archdeacon and administering the church. But in the end, as it says, they knew they needed a bishop. They're always fighting, always waiting for bishops, sending letters to foreign leader, the churches to help support them, the foreign sister churches or sister churches to help them. So it said though on 22nd May 1653, even though there's not a strict account, like minutes written, like we would say, come down to us, but it says historically that's been passed down orally, and kind of what people kept saying is because of the revolt, the community being so agitated and hurt by the Roman Catholic rule and the Portuguese stopping them from maintaining their faith as they're used to practicing, and now they hear the news that they stopped one of their bishop from their community coming from Syria or from at least Persia, and then he's being killed. They said that's enough. That enough is enough. So they said, we're going to raise our archdeacon to be as a bishop or metron. The only part, they don't have a bishop to raise him, but they have 12 priests. It says 12 priests lay hands on the archdeacon, and then they raise him to the episcopal rank. Now, the problem with that is there's no service within the real history of the church that says that priests can raise somebody to be bishop, no matter how you can. They said there's 12. They fight for a good number. 12 is a holy number for this in the scripture, so they picked 12, and there's 12 disciples, so they picked 12 priests to raise him to that rank. But there's no validity, or at least there's no real tradition of seeing that. But there is a little bit in the history, but we know the normal way of doing it is, the bishops come together and raise one amongst the community to be bishop. And so and that's what caused a lot of issues, as we see within the community, of the validity of this Archdeacon Thomas now being raised as a metron and now being known as the title of Marthoma the First. And this is where we see in the history of the church, we have the long lines of the Marthomas that lead the church, these indigenous priests or archdeacons who are raised to the rank of as priests, and then to the rank of the metropolitan for the Malankar Church or the Malabar Church. And then we see this being the central figure for our community against the foreign European powers who are trying to make us either Roman Catholic or make us something else, right? So the first line of these indigenous bishops for our church begin with this Marthoma the First. And it starts in this kind of controversial way with 12 priests raising him as a bishop. They say it comes, the reason they did it because they said the letter from the Marathala had given them the right to raise him temporarily as metron on the condition that till the position is ratified, meaning another bishop comes, and he should not ordain any priesthood at that time or do anything else other than he should be seen as the central figure. The accuracy or the realness, of this, is in dispute. But there's no dispute that the community was really looking to make sure they had someone of their own to represent them. And so this Marthala was a figure that was used for sure to kind of promote that, him being a bishop representing a Syrian church and giving authority by the patriarch to do these things, to support them and to raise one of them as a bishop. They take that and help them to go for it. So, we couch it by saying the bishop, he was only made bishop conditionally. And so that's why even Roman Catholic historians point out that they put a lot of high doubt of the realness of an actual letter being sent. And that's what we see that happens during the reign or the administration of Marthoma the First. All we see is contempt of his ordination. So he's never supported, and at every turn they find the Portuguese and the Roman Catholic Church find ways to exert pressure for him not to be recognized at all as any kind of as leader of the community. That with their relations with the local kings and rajas, and their ability to prevent other bishops or other people coming to support them. They take every effort to make sure that he should be able to function, because they're also, that just shows how scared they are. That meaning he's being seen now as a leader, not just as an archdeacon, but now as metron or as a bishop, and so And so then that's something that they're making clear. The Roman Catholic Church is making clear to stop as quickly as they can. So that's why we say during his time he endured a lot of struggles and pains. And even they say when you see him as a historical figure, even his qualities, particularly in his Roman Catholic writings, is always very negative. You know, he sings as a duplicitous person, not a good person, things like that. But as we see it, and we'll see later lessons, basically Samuel Hutchinson will write, you know, we have to look at the situation that he was in. Lots of time it might be true that the things might have been made up or exaggerated, but they're doing it to support this idea of being free of foreign rule, right? And so that's the key thing. Last thing, just to kind of highlight, Father, the book mentions how you might have a tradition of having 12, priest raise somebody as a bishop. There is in an ancient, like old, we think early church, how bishops were actually consecrated. We know that it's only by the first ecumenical council in Nicaea that it's clearly written that bishops should consecrate each other. Only bishops should be consecrated by other bishops. But there's a fact that even in Alexandria, it was a presbyter council, meaning a council of priests who selected their next, when there was a need for the next bishop to be or patriarch for the Alexandria, it was the council of presbyters who made that happen. So presbyters usually was only just as priests, not a holy synod of bishops, but it was the presbyters council. And so we see that even in the early church of hinting that there was, bishops being just selected amongst the priests of that region or that community or that large city. But we know that by the first ecumenical council, it's regularized that only bishops can only be consecrated by other bishops. And so then that's always been the practice. That's why it says, it concludes by saying, Martha I was made bishop in 1653 was not right, meaning sense of it wasn't regular per the customs of the church. All right. But like I said, it highlights the need of the people or wanting to make sure to not be under this foreign rule, right? In terms of the church in particular, and this is what our lessons are about. And that leads us to the second lesson for this unit. Kind of one of the sad things that we see in the history of our church is, as much as we're work together and we want to have, we know it now, when we look at it, we would see even then people want to be as one community as together, but we always see there's divisions amongst disagreeing opinions, but even in families. And so as it states here, that the council of 4 priests who are supposed to support the archdeacon, 2 of those priests leave from the archdeacon, who's now Martha Mother First, and rejoin with the Catholics. They don't like, and so that because of disagreements or seeing that this community might not survive, and there's more power with the Roman Catholics, or just they disagree more with what the Roman Catholics are doing. It says that this Perambul Chandi Katanar left for the other side. And he joined because now the Church of Rome sent no longer Portuguese missionaries, but they're sending now these Carmelite Italian, and so Italian missionaries, and so they find support amongst them. And so this Martha Mother First and Parambal Chandi were first cousins; they're sons of brothers, and so. It says that even after his conversion, also Kadaval Chandi of Korinthe also joined this Parambal Chandi, but the other 2 priests of that council, the Ititomen and Vangagiris, remained with Martha Mother First. And so we see that even the split amongst the small committee who are supposed to support Martha Mother First, amongst these 4 priests, even then there's a division. 2 of them remaining back with the Catholics, and 2 remaining with Martha Mother First. And so we see all this kind of thing being, all this happening in the church. And so then it just shows how strong that the Roman Catholic Church is, like how powerful they are. And so they're looking for ways to put out or take away the the power of Martha Mother First and the community who want to not be Roman Catholic. And so we see that their bishop, the Portuguese bishop who's still there, Archbishop Garcia, he's asking for assistance and looking to find ways to, to change the situation with the community, because now there's that strong split. And so, Garcia is the one who's asking support from the Portuguese, from Rome. And then he even appealed to, he says, the native kings for help. And so, but no one's really wanting to help in this situation. There, this division amongst the Christian community in the Malabar coast. And so, and now even the community of the Malabar or the Christians, the St. Thomas Christians, have no faith in these Jesuit Portuguese bishops and missionaries. And so, as these European powers are particularly Rome, with the Portuguese, they're trying to find a way to, resolve the situation. It says the authorities in Goa, which is the center of Roman Catholicism in South India, they try different things. So they send this person, John Rangel, and then John de Lisboa, to kind of maybe smooth things over with Martha Mother First. It says the John Rangel's not able to do anything, but then John de Lisboa is able to. It says, at least in their history, says he was able to convince Martha from actually any episcopal function, and he even sent a letter as had him write a letter of apology about the revolt to the authorities. When it says to go to the Roman Catholic authorities, leadership in India, or particularly in South India, and then but he did this only on the condition that he should be recommended for a bishop of the church, right? So that's what it says, how John de Lisboa was able to kind of smooth over Martha Mother First. But it says in the end, nothing really went forward. There was no real resolve, and so so then he knew he couldn't get this Garcia, the Roman Catholic Church were not finding ways. So especially Garcia, since he was the administrator in the church in the Malabar coast, when he saw he couldn't get help from Rome and from the Goan authorities, he finds a way in getting the community back by converting back this Parambol Chandi to change back to his side, leave Martha Mother First side and get them back to the Roman Catholic side. And so that's a key thing that they do. And like I mentioned earlier at the introduction, by this 17th century, Rome's their thinking of how they can resolve it is to stop sending Portuguese missionaries and say, we need to send like more, not just one country. They said from when we mentioned in the beginning, when they split the world by the Perota, one side of the world is for Spain and for them to do missionary work, and the other side of this line is for the Portuguese. They say, that's no longer a good practice, right? So they set up the Society of the Propagation of the Gospel, and so particularly to end them in Portuguese monopoly in the missionary work in India, as it says. And so, and it says even at this time, even Archdeacon Thomas, even before he's elevated as before Queen and Cross and before him being Bartha Mother First, he asked for, stop sending these Jesuits, these Portuguese people, send somebody else to help us out. And they do, and they send other people. And so when they do this, these Italian missionaries come, and the first one is Joseph Sabatani. He's chosen to be as the bishop for the Roman bishop to control the matters that's happening there. And just like we said, Garcia was able to convince two of that leadership council to join with him. Sebastiani was able to add to that by questioning the validity of Martha Mother First episcopal rank, ordination. He's saying that and calls him as a fake metron or fake bishop. And so by doing this, he's able to even get more people to join. Like, especially now he already has the Parambol Chandi and Etitumen to be with him. They're also getting more back at the community by spreading how Martha Mother First is not a real bishop by the time he comes, right? And so they're able to dwindle, or at least to kind of attack the community who's looking for freedom away from the Roman Catholic Church, right? And so all this is happening. Some of these things, some of it, there's is just highlighting how there's some things they're not able to do because, as we said earlier, Kerala is not one political entity, right? There's small little kingdoms. So even though for these Roman Catholic missionaries, they have to work with each different little kingdom to do the work. And so some places were not, the Sabbatani's kind of campaign to discredit Martha the First is not as good or as effective because they're not able to work in certain kingdoms. King of Cochin was able to they're able to get the King of Cochin to kind of get on their side. And so Martha the First is not able to go to those territories. But in the other smaller kingdoms where the Portuguese, these missionaries don't have, these Carmelite missionaries don't have a kind of an influence, the Martha the First group and the side that's with Martha the First is able to continue more strongly in those areas. And so all this kind of comes to a head by finding ways to kind of bring all this together and kind of find a better way to control this. So Substanti's trying his best to control the Church of Malabar, but he knows that the Portuguese are still there. They're not completely taken out. And so he knows he has to be also kind of he has to be kind of delicate in how he's doing things, because Portuguese and these Jesuits and these Italian Carmelites are still one church, even though they're on two different sides. And so even for them, this shows kind of the delicate balance that they're having to put. At the same time, as politically and what's happening historically in world history, the Dutch are also coming. And so by this time, also now the Dutch have kind of driven out the Portuguese. And so now Sabastani and these Carmelite missionaries look to maybe find a way to take advantage of that. Now there's no more Portuguese that they worry about. It's now the Dutch who are not Catholic, but at least maybe they can find a way to kind of have them support them rather than this independent group. And so we see that happening. The Dutch kind of side more with their Carmelites because they're also there, because of their connection with other kingdoms in Europe, and having more connection with them rather than the native people in Kerala. And so, and like we said earlier, the Dutch really tried to stay indifferent. They didn't care about the church affairs. They just wanted to do trade and kind of control the trade that's coming out of South India. So they were like, whatever, but we have more connection or more in common with the Roman Catholics, even though we're fighting in Europe, we have more in common with you than we do with these native people here. So then more times than not, if there was a decision to be made or what side they would kind of more support, it always leaned towards the Catholic side. And so that's one of the difficulties we see also during this period, when even though the Portuguese are kind of driven out and the Dutch are in charge, the Dutch really didn't help them during this time. And so that's where we see a lot of the difficulties that Martin the First had. As it's highlighted in the book, he's a controversial figure. A lot of historians of today, they can't rely on. There's no first-hand accounts and positive of him, right? Most of it, all the accounts that we have that's passed down to us now that we can read, are from the missionaries who criticized him, and so then, so we can't tell whether if they're all exaggerated or false, or good or bad, because what we have now that talks about this Martha the First, that's a historical records, are all coming from the opposing side, right? So that's why we see that in the history of this Martha the First, he's a very controversial figure, because most things written about him that we have today that's passed down is all negative. But as Achen writes, no matter what we have or we know, we have to admit that the elevation of Martha the First, whether right or wrong, was an act of his own. Was not an act of his own. It's the act of the community, like I said earlier. And that's kind of the big takeaway. There was an unhappy, the section of the community, the church, the Christian community, who did not want to be under foreign rule, did not want the Roman Catholics. And so this is why he was raised as a metropolitan, or raised as a matron, to be bishop for them. they wanted to take off the supremacy of Rome. Even though the Roman authorities and historians will say that no, the communities didn't necessarily didn't like Rome. They just didn't like the particular people that were in Kerala at the time, be it the Portuguese, these Jesuits, whatever it might be. They said people really still like Rome, and they were able to convince many of the community. That's why it's still split in half. They're able to get them to side with them, or to side with them, because like I said, a lot of times because they have a lot of influence with the local leaders, the Hindu kings that are there, they have a lot of influence in their power because of trade. They have a lot of influence because these European powers are controlling kind of world affairs, and so people understood that, right? And so it might have seemed very difficult to kind of oppose them. And so that's what we see. There's a flow of people from the side of Marthama to go move over to the side of the Catholics, right? And partly because of, like we said, that campaign by Sabatani to kind of really convince people that his ordination was invalid, right? Sorry. I don't want to do that. I don't know why that highlighted. Take that off. There we go. And so in order to achieve so we say like the one kind of the controversial thing that Martha the First did, it said that at one of the meetings, he said he had a sealed envelope claiming to have the letter from Marathala showing his authority. We kind of talked about it earlier. That was done during a 3-day Lent, and so we can't corroborate what he had. He just said he had a letter that was from Marathala and he said it said that he should be that he gave the authority from the patriarch to be as the metron. But there's no way of verifying that, right? Another thing that Martha I did in 1659, he said that at one point he said the Roman pontiff himself, or the Roman Pope himself, ratified or agreed that he should be as the leader, trying to convince people that even though this bishop, the Catholic bishops here in India are saying that I'm not a bishop, he said the Pope in Rome is accepting me as a bishop, but there's no way to corroborate that. He's just saying that and trying to, we can say he's trying to do that just to kind of convince people to accept him. And all this kind of, so Martha's first tenure as the first metropolitan, or first, Indian-born metropolitan for our community during this time, to help lead this community away from this Roman Catholic oppression or yoke. He's writing letters and looking for support. He's having to defend himself that he is a true bishop, and all these things. All this comes to a head, or comes to an end for him, or at least kind of finds some kind of fulfillment with the arrival of Mar Gregorios of Jerusalem, right? Yeah, and he's coming from the Antiochian Syrian church, right? He's the bishop of Jerusalem for the Antiochian Patriarch. And so the community there, especially the community that's wanting freedom or independence, welcomes this Mar Gregorios of Jerusalem with great, with great splendor. It says we welcome with open arms, because this is something they were looking to kind of help solidify their position. Even Martha I, he knows, because of all the questions about his validity can help be resolved by this Syrian bishop, because they're hoping that he'll support their side. And so I want to get to this, the beginning, the preliminary remarks for this lesson 3. As Father V.C. Samwachan mentions, that Martha I had 2 objectives when he's taking charge: to encounter the charge that his episcopal orders were imperfect, and 2, to bring an end of the custom of royal power entering the religious field of forcing people one way or the other. So that's the key thing. So then he's having to fight, to maintain the independence and of the community to be as they had before the arrival of the Portuguese. He's having to find a way to, regularize what him as a bishop, and also trying to stop the influence of these Hindu kings and the kings from Europe from having so much influence amongst the community. And so he's needing to find a way to get out of that. And this Mar Gregorios of Jerusalem is kind of the person that he latches onto. The other big thing that he has to kind of deal with, it says that after the Dutch victory comes to Kerala, a native bishop begins to lead the Roman Catholic section And so the bishop that there was raised, the native person to raise amongst the Catholic community in Malabar was Parambal Chandi himself. The priest that was to be his support, a part of his inner council, and then the one who kind of broke away and joined back with the Catholics. He's now raised as bishop for their side. And so now these two cousins and these two friends, the people who were together at one point, are now on opposing sides, right? And so this is all that they have to deal with, right? The key thing is, Samuel Achen mentions the victory of the Dutch, that they drive out the Portuguese, and so once the missionaries see that the Portuguese no longer there, they don't have any Roman Catholic powers to kind of support them and kind of protect them, and so these missionaries are very keen and very smart, saying, you know what, we're probably not going to be able to keep power ourselves, or be able to maintain the rule. We need to do our part in making sure that we can find a leader amongst this Catholic community that we've raised up and that we're supporting, that we're trying to build up here, and make sure they're on our side. So even if we get kicked out, or even if we don't have won't ever have the military and political power to kind of influence and to kind of force, we can kind of continue to win hearts with this campaign to make sure that we have even one amongst you as a leader who is supporting us, right? Supporting the Roman, the pontiff side, the Roman Pope side. And so he's the one that gets Parambal Chandi Katanar to be raised to episcopal dignity. And he gets the permission from Rome. And also, he also went with Bishop Chandi Kochin to go to the Dutch authorities there, because now they're in control, and to make sure that they get protection for them. Like, so they're getting the Dutch to get on their side before the Martha Mother first side is able to kind of get any influence and get support from these these new people in charge, the Dutch people who are in charge. And like I said before, the Dutch didn't care much one way or the other, but they always, when there was a dispute or any kind of problem, they would side more with the Catholic side. That's what it says in this lesson, that this part says, as Bishop was alive, the Dutch helped him more than anything else, especially when Bishop Chandi was wanting to get his name his successor. He wanted to name his nephew, Parambal Mathew, to be his successor. He wanted to get support from the Dutch to help him with that, even though that the Carmelites and the other Roman Catholics in India weren't too keen to have that happen. He was able to kind of get the Dutch on his side to kind of support him. And so at the same time, he never forced it, right? So then it says that this the Bishop Chandi Katanar, Bishop Chandi, now he always remained faithful to Rome, and so he didn't force the issue, but he also applied the pressure to try and get his nephew to be as the next leader after his passing. And so, like I said, the Dutch kind of make agreements with the Catholics. Even back in Europe, it says Pope Innocent the 12th reached agreement with the Dutch authorities to allow these missionaries to continue on and to work in Kerala and to kind of continue to provide leadership for the church there. And that's how they get this Parambal to be as bishop. The one thing that it mentions here is that Bishop Chandi did not have any educational qualification to be as a leader, other than he knew Syriac, right? And that's why he could celebrate Qurbana. But they said that's all he knew, that he didn't have any great theological background or really support other people, I guess, in that sense. But he had the help of the Dutch and some of the native kings. And so, like I said, and because of his association with these powerful groups, especially with association with Rome, he was able to lead. And like I said, and he had the hope to have his nephew to succeed him. But like I said, as much as he wanted that to happen, he knew that he couldn't do anything without their support. The Roman authorities found his replacement in the person of Rafael Figueiredo de Salgado. He was a Portuguese or an Indian-born Portuguese person, right? So his parents are Portuguese, but was born in India, but he's not a native Indian, right? Or he was just kind of us, born an immigrant, first community Portuguese born and raised in India. So he's one that's consecrated, or he's the one that's chosen. He gets nominated, and then and he's selected. Bishop Chandy's not happy, and he said he's trying to get the other people to get this nomination not to go through, but it says that that does come through. He gets selected, and someone does come to consecrate him. While all this is happening, this Parable Chandy is made as their bishop. This is now the coming of Mar Gregorios of Jerusalem, and so this was the final hope Martha I had to make sure the community could move forward. One of the things that's kind of brought up is, Martha I thought he could maybe reconcile with the Jesuits, with the Catholics, and kind of find a way, but then that didn't happen. So with the arrival of Mar Gregorios, they're welcomed by Martha I and the large group of the faithful, and so it says that both Martha I and Mar Gregorios were engaged in many services in cooperation together, and it just shows, this highlights the Mar Gregorios, though he's now coming new, and he probably heard how Martha I was ordained by 12, was elevated by 12 priests. He didn't disqualify him as being the leader and disqualify him to serve with him, because they said they cooperate together in leading services together and visiting the community. And so it just shows Mar Gregorios was very an apt leader. He's keen, he's understanding of the situation on the ground, and so he's looking away to kind of, okay, there's this community we need to help. We need to find a way to get these people with us, away from Roman Catholicism, and also he's knowing that there's a strong Nestorian connection. So we need to find a way to get them on our side, because he's part of the West Syriac tradition, the Antiochian, from the Syriac Antiochian Patriarchate, which is not Persian or not Nestorian, and so he's very apt, and because of how he's received, because he's coming as a fellow a bishop from a Syriac worshiping tradition, and now and he's seen as a hope to get to take up the Roman persecution, and so he takes advantage of that situation and works with that situation. And so it says that he has all the intentions to bring the Church of Malabar within the liturgical liturgy and traditions of the Syrian Church of Antioch, right? But he knows he can't do it all at once. But because the common language is Syriac and how he's received, he's able to have influence. He's able to teach the people how a lot of things that got changed, especially at the Synod of Uriampur that we talked about earlier, when the Roman Catholics get together and they get the community together and say, hey, all these practices you're doing as St. Thomas Christians before our arrival and with a Persian connection, a lot of those things are wrong. And so, that's when they changed the rule that, all the priests had to be as unmarried. You have to start using unleavened bread and all these things. He's able to say that or point to how those things are not actually true. That is, having married priesthood is part of the tradition. We use leavened bread, and so a lot of things that they made you do are not within the traditions of your forefathers, and which I'm a part of that same or similar tradition. And so then he starts highlighting the Latin, highlighting what the Latin traditions that were brought by the Synod of Uriampur, and is able to kind of gain more acceptance and getting them to change how they dress a little bit, how they do services, and saying how it's a separation from these Roman Catholics, these Latins who've been oppressing you for the last almost 50, 60, 70 years. He's starting to get followers because that's what the people wanting, not to have that upon them. So as it highlights the Christians in Kerala of the 16th and 17th centuries, we're not people who knew all the different nuances and differences of these different groups of Roman Catholics, the Persian Church of the East, and these Antiochian Church. They're just trying to figure out to be what their forefathers, right? And so we know from the Portuguese side and the Roman side, all they did was to do whatever they could to make them unite with Rome. And so the group that stood with Marthama faced all the difficulties and worked with Mar Gregorios to make sure that they could continue on not following these foreign practices, but truly following practices that were more in line with their heritage, right? And so we see Margaret passes away on April 24th, 1671, and he's buried at the North Park Church here in Kerala. And then it says Martha I dies 2 years later and is buried in the church in Angamali, right? And so as it says here, though some people will say that Margaret didn't really accept Martha I rank as bishop, as I said earlier, and Father Samuel mentions here, though he might have had that thinking, he might really not really thought, he really thought, hey, this Martha I was not really regular in his elevation, but as it says in this lesson, they all work together, right? They worked together, or he worked with him, and so it shows that at a minimum he was willing to look past that irregular consecration and make sure to kind of build this community, and in hopes that they'll be strong with, on their faith, be it because he had some kind of ulterior motive or just in a genuine positive, they're a fellow Syriac worshiping community, we need to support them. It seems to be Margaret's focus more than anything else. The last part of this section is a letter. It highlights a letter that Margaret had sent to certain churches in Kerala, the Para Church, Mulanthurthi, and Kandana Church, and it highlights how he was very particular, making sure people knew the differences of all these different traditions and how they should be more with the West Syriac tradition or the Antiochian church side. First thing he highlighted in this Kalpana or this letter, he says, for the first 1600 years, the Church of Malabar was never a part of the Church of Rome, of the Roman Catholic Church, and the Portuguese had no legitimate authority to change the customs and practices of the church that they have done for hundreds of years. And so the church deserves to maintain that heritage. He says all the years these churches were, before, like I said earlier, there was always married priesthood before. They changed that. And so he said that's a change to the heritage and to traditions. He said that they changed how they fast, especially particularly during the Great Lent. He showed in other letters how we changed the disregarded in faith, and which is in the next lesson about the understanding of who Christ is, how he's two natures, both God and man. And the final thing he highlights in the letter is they should not believe in the church or the churches of Rome. The church itself is only Rome, but they should believe in the one holy Catholic and apostolic church. So this Kalpana, or this episcopal letter of encouraging the people to remain faithful to the heritage and traditions of their Syriac roots is written by this Margaros to these churches in Kerala, these three churches in Kerala. Okay, now as we move on to the lesson 4, it just highlights the different Marthomas during this period. So far, we've only been mentioning Marthoma I, but by the time of his passing, we have Marthoma II, Marthoma III, who didn't do much, as it says here in the lesson. They didn't do much, or there's not much accounted about what they did for the church. But when we get to Marthoma IV, he led the church for about 40 years, and it's during his time that a lot of things happen in the church. And I know it doesn't say here, but I'm almost certain that this is the Shepherd Marthoma, believe, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe not, I forget. But Marthoma I, he deals with a lot of the church and dealing with a lot of the things that were happening at the time. Then after Marthoma IV, we have Marthoma V and VI, who are also considered as understood as able leaders of the church. And so it is during this time that we have the two sections, like we've been talking about this whole unit. And so then that is also during this time of the Marthomas that our church now becomes more in line with the Antiochian church. But prior to this, there was no we didn't worship in line completely like the West Syriac tradition, or we were just part of the Syriac tradition as a whole, which was both East and West. And because we had more in line with the Persian connection, as it's been highlighted in this book, we are more East Syriac worshiping and had that more practice of traditions. But they're still shared as a common heritage, like having married priesthood, the use of leavened bread, those kind of things. all those in line together, just with certain differences. The main one being Nestorianism, which we'll talk about later in this lesson. But it's important to note that the church is trying its best to maintain its heritage, but at the same time, no one really wants to see a split, right? And so that's what it says, this concluding paragraph of the introduction. So by the 17th and 18th centuries, both sides had the desire to unite. But this was not out of concern for the church union that was derived from theological understanding of the church. The desire was motivated by an urge of certain churches to come together for the desire of gaining leadership. Kind of like we have today. Some people, because it looks better to have a bigger group than a smaller group. A lot of that was kind of the impetus, or that was the more of the reason for some of these leaders, people wanting to be united, because they want to have everyone with them, especially be it the Roman Catholic side or the independent side. But it's important to know that there was still always a push for unity, even if they had these ulterior motives. But we know in the end it doesn't work out. There still maintains this split within the community, even to this day. The key things that we take away from this time, that after Martham I, Martham II, there's not much. Like I said, he did much for the church, or there's not things to write about. The key things for Martham II, like I said, part of it was it was during his time that there were there was a desire to have the church to unite, and so there, as much as we said earlier, that Bishop Chandy, who was the leader of the Roman Catholic side, or the Catholic Indian side, he had a desire to have his nephew, Archdeacon Mathew, to be his successor. But it says that this Bishop Chandy had great respect for Martham II. He liked him, and so if the Roman authorities were not going to allow for his nephew to be his successor, it says that he had a desire. He knew that Martham II had a desire to unite both sides, and he said there could be a plan to have him, the Martham II, to be the successor to this Bishop Chandy. So then, but it says that nothing happened of that, and it says Martham II passed away in 1886, and he's buried at the church, the Niranam Church. And so then that's what he's known for. It says one kind of highlights of during his tenure before he passes away. It says it's during his time that the Syrian Bishop Mar Basilios, or Elder Mar Basilios, and Mar Ivanios arrived to Kerala. And so we know that's Elder Mar Basilios is one of the saints of our church. He came. He was declared saint with Paramatirmini. He dies pretty much right when he arrives in Kerala, but we know him as a saintly bishop who's willing to come support the church in need and to continue to help the faithful. And then it is Mar Ivanios, who also came with them, who kind of helps strengthen the West Syriac tradition amongst our community, right? And so it also mentions there was another person named an Andrew, some in places we know, and places in Kerala we know as Andreas Brava, but it's not clear if he actually was a bishop or not. That's why it writes as just as Andrew. He also comes during this time. But the main thing is, Elder Mar Baselios, he comes to kind of support the church in Kerala, but he dies and is buried in Kodamangampally. But Mar Ivanos is able to stay and remain in Kerala for 8 years, and it is through his leadership or through his guidance that we have the strengthening of the West Syriac faith and traditions. And he's the one who gives episcopal leadership for the consecrations of Martham III and Martham IV by this Bishop Mar Ivanios. Martham III also not much written, about his time as the metropolitan, but he serves, and then it comes to Martham IV. As we said earlier, that he serves and ministers for 40 years as the bishop for our area. And it's during his time that the Mar Gabriel arrives in Kerala, and there's another figure, a foreign bishop who's coming, but he's coming from the Persian church, or a church under Nestorian patriarch. But as we'll learn later, he also becomes, even in the Nestorian, the Persian church side, there's Roman Catholics there too, and they're able to get a large section of the Persian church to come under to unite with the Roman Church, the Uniate Church. They're known as the Chaldeapoli or the Chaldean Church. And this Mar Gabriel is able to kind of say that he's also with them under Rome and try to make division again amongst the community. And it's to Marthoma IV and Mar Ivanios who stand firm in defending the faith of the community now, being strongly now West Syriac, right? Or amongst the faith as is practiced within the Antiochian Syrian side, right? And so it's because of this Mar Gabriel, that's why he says Marthoma IV even wrote a letter to the Patriarch asking for more bishops or priests to come to help teach the faith against these Nestorian Catholic and Catholic practices, right? Because they're able to kind of get people on their side. It says he writes these letters, and some of them never really reached. It says they never reached to the Patriarch. And then it says after faithfully serving, it says Marthoma IV died on 26 March 1728, and is buried at the church in Kandahar. It says before he did that, he dies. It says he consecrated his successor. But it's like I said, we see a lot of this happening in the history of our church. The Marthoma wanted to consecrate his nephew or cousin, and like on their deathbed or just before dying, they place their hands on the candidate. Sometimes they're not accepted, sometimes they are. But as it highlights in this book, one of the real reasons why he's not accepted, or one cause, is that, as Achen writes, V.C. Samuel Achen writes, the Syrian Christian Kerala had a tendency to revere foreigners, so much so that Mar Gabriel having been in the country, they expected him to be there at his consecration to make it more valid. And since he was not there, Marthoma IV just kind of consecrates his successor by himself. So then that's another cause for people to dispute and kind of not accept this group, this line, the other Marthomas, as their authority, I should say. It's kind of a reoccurring theme that's happening within the church. So then getting back to the standpoint of the Roman Catholics, this is all happening within their view. They see all this happening. This Mar Gregorius is kind of an agitator who brought the Jacobite faith to Malabar, causing schism. And so that's when they see these Roman Catholic historians call the Pudya Kutakar, meaning the new group versus the old group. They are considered as the old because meaning more original, because they're saying that the Catholic was always there, and this new group is Jacobites, or a new innovation. And so that's kind of the perspective, especially after all this happens. That's their perspective, and that's why we have this. You might hear the term these terms, Putin Kutur versus Barya Kutakar, sorry, and it's just saying the new versus old, and like I say, they're trying to claim who's the more ancient one, right? And so that's something that to be mindful of when we're studying the history of our church. And so, and that's we still see to this day. This is kind of the Roman Catholic view regarding the validity of our group, especially particularly when it comes to these Marthoma bishops. The line of these Marthomas, the 1 through, it goes all the way to 9. But there's always to say you guys are a new innovation, especially when our church now becomes more West Syriac tradition. It's a new thing. It's an innovation that's outside of that was different from what the community understood. Getting back, or just kind of highlighting a little bit of who this Mar Gabriel was. Like it says, I mentioned earlier, he arrived in India or Kerala from Madras, coming to Ceylon or Kollam in 1708. He's deputed by the Patriarch Elias of the Nestorian Church, and he's claimed to convert to Roman Catholicism and joined with Patriarch Joseph, who's the Uniate Persian Patriarch at that time. And so he obtains Rome's approval, this Mar Gabriel, being there, but he's not really accepted to have charge, because there's already Roman Catholic, especially in Goa and these other Bishop Chandian and his successors. There's already bishops there, and so he's not fully accepted or fully, like there's some challenges for him of doing things. But it says that Patriarch Joseph was the Unite Nestorian patriarch. He's able to gain acceptance amongst the Syrian Catholics of Kerala because they recognize that Patriarch Joseph was the Syriac Catholic or the Persian Nestorian Chaldea patriarch. And so with his letters coming, he gets some acceptance amongst the Syrian Christians. That's what he said earlier when Martha Mother I was trying to appoint his successor, his successor for Martha Mother V. A lot of people expected that Mark Gabriel should be there because he's a foreign bishop who has a standing with one of the patriarchs from the West. And so that's where a lot of this trouble for Martha Mother I began, with this Mark Gabriel coming. One of the key things that V.C. Selmerton kind of asked the question, if the history of our church in Malabar has always been, prior to this Portuguese coming, being more Nestorian, why was he displeased with Mark Gabriel? And why was Margaret given, how was Margaret able to find that opportunity to kind of give in to propagate the Antiochian Syrian church faith in dealing with the church in Malabar? And as B.C. Selmerton writes, one of the key things in understanding is Mark Gabriel came to with the ulterior motive of having more political gain in Malabar, and Martha I, fourth, used all his power to resist that, because he saw that how if you're getting only just the support of the royal authorities, the kings and rajas and these foreign kings, is always something bad news. So then he saw Margaret Gabriel was always looking after getting the approval and support of these political figures, and he said that doesn't mix well with the church affairs. Secondly, Mark Gabriel being a Persian or Nestorian, because of the Catholic influence, also the Catholics said Nestorians are bad, and they had that upbringing, Nestorians are bad. So then that's a second reason for distrust of Mark Gabriel. And also third, with Gregorius being in Kerala and now propagating the Antiochian Christian faith, which is also very anti-Nestorian because we're the faith of the three ecumenical synods and we reject Nestorianism. And because of his teaching and now other community and supporting and teaching the faith as he knows it and is called to continue to propagate, all these things made Martha Mother IV and those with him to really distrust Mark Gabriel. And so with all that happening, this just highlights Marvanus who was the one, Margaret passed away pretty soon. So Marvanus is the one who's there teaching for those 8 years. And he teaches about the difference between the Council of Chalcedon and how they differ, and how that's accepted by the Roman Catholic Church, but not our church, because of the understanding of the nature of Christ. At the same time, the Persian church was the church that was rejected, or the Persian faith of Nestorius was the one that was highly rejected at the Third Ecumenical Council in Ephesus in 431. And so then he's very able to kind of combat or to teach the Syriac, the Antiochian Christian faith of the three ecumenical synods, of which we to this day we still profess. And so those things are all working against this the influence of Mark Gabriel to the extent. That's how they're able to tie that as best as they could of his influence. And so Achen kind of highlights that one of the key things of the traditions Mar Vanios we had is the teaching of Christ. And so, like I said, the nature of Christ. But another thing they highlighted was the Roman Catholic Church always had claimed global supremacy. That's also another major difference between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Antiochian faith. But he says no one really in Malankar understood this fact properly at the time. And so that's something that we have to be mindful of. And so that leads us to as it says, the section 4, the advancement of the Antiochian Syrian effort. And this kind of highlights this Andreas Baba, or this Andrew, who's a priest. There's not too much to mention about him other than he was there, in places where he's kind of venerated. I think particularly in the Kolam area, he's able to have some influence. That's all they want to say, but I don't want to spend too much time on him. But that person, he's also another figure of the Syriac, the West Syriac or the Antiochian tradition that was there around this time, and he also kind of had difference with the Marthamas and how they did ordinations, but that's kind of just like a kind of a side thing of who he was. Other than we know that it says kind of the historical books, he was a Jacquard priest who lived in Kerala, right? And so that's all I really want to highlight about him. So the main thing is with all that happening, so then by the time that Mar Baselios has come to Kerala, we see that it was an important part for this, or at least amongst the Antiochian Patriarch, to send someone to help support the church in Kerala, or the church in Malabar. And so, especially he says that the Mar Baselios was a Catholicos who was sent to Kerala. And so then he was a saintly bishop who was old and was the Catholicos of the West Syriac tradition. And he was willing to go to Kerala for this to support our church. It says, why was that the case? And it just says that it just shows that the importance that by this time that the West Syriac church, the Antiochian church now saw in supporting our church, but with the groundwork laid by Mar Gregorios, who came prior, and then now with Mar Baselios and Mar Ivanios coming, it just shows that they're looking to build up the church against these and support our church in Kerala and maintaining the original, the heritage of the forefathers within the Syriac tradition, which is not have any Catholic influence, and to remain as the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And then now it's where the church now that's principally enshrined or principally proclaim the faith of the three ecumenical synods of Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus. And so that's one of the key things that's highlighted. The other parts that are highlighted is the understanding who Christ is. He is one incarnate nature of God the Word. He's both fully God and fully man without confusion, of being perfect man, perfect God without any confusion, and he's preserved as known as one. We don't see him as two. As this new Nestorian would really teach that Christ was, was just a kind of a separate two entities that's available. And then even the Council of Chalcedon trying to make a definition of how Christ can be both God and man. And they also have this duality kind of that was there that our church fathers and theologians did not appreciate as it was proclaimed in the Chalcedon Council. And so this is what these this Antiochian church fathers are teaching and proclaiming and now building up within our Mullingar church. And then also the Nicene Creed, how it's worded that the Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father and is worshipped and glorified for the Father and Son. This teaching of the Syriac church also didn't have a practice of adoring pictures or even icons at the time because of the Roman Muslim influence, but also the iconoclasm that happened a lot prior. So the Syriac church, even though they had icons and pictures, but this adoration of pictures was kind of not a common practice, as it was particularly in the Roman side, especially with statues and pictures and adoring them. These Syrian fathers said those things are wrong. They're there for good use, and leading. The icons can be used for just kind of as a teaching tool, but not for adoration. So that was highlighted. Like we said earlier, having married priests who was acceptable, and using leavened bread, right? And some of the key things that are the takeaways for this. And finally, these last two lessons, the Syrian Christians who joined the Catholic Church, the main things for this is because of all these different things that are happening, we know that the Roman side really had great influence and authority and power from the time that they came, especially when Archbishop Menendez comes and leads the Synod of Uriampur and wholesale kind of changed a lot of the practice of the community, making them more in line with the Roman Catholic Church and destroying and burning a lot of our books and kind of conforming the church in the Malabar coast and the Mullingar Church to be now as as Roman practicing. That all happens within that 50-year period leading up to the Kunin Cross. But it was they were able to quickly get that to happen and exert their authority and supremacy. But because of how quickly they're changing things and people recognizing that's not what they, what we know. We have the Kunin Cross, and then the issues that we had before. And so the key things that we have to be mindful of, even though all the Christians in Kerala recognize that, we're St. Thomas Christians, right? And we know that there was connection between the 16th century. And so with all this happening, there is a view that we need to kind of maintain that. But because with Roman Catholics wanting to have us join with them, this is kind of almost a recap of what we just talked about. We know that the Roman Church was very keen in making sure that they can keep this community, and they worked very hard in doing it. So that's why they had the Propaganda Society in response to the Kunin Cross and trying to bring back and maintain and add to their numbers, which we already talked about earlier. And that's how they brought the Carmelite missionaries and took out the Jesuit Portuguese missionaries. And they had people from this Propaganda Society with the intent of maintaining their control. And so they keep doing that. And so even though that the community, it says during this time, would have preferred a native or national, meaning an Indian national, to be the leader, to replace as they're having successive bishops, these foreign bishops, these Italians or these Carmelites or these Portuguese or whoever is coming from Europe, they're not allowing for a native person, during this time up until they do this Bishop Chandi. So they're appointing these different priests from, the second time being an Italian priest to be as their to lead them. And so we see that that's kind of the way that the Roman Church continue to exert control amongst the community. So then, like I said, and we don't need it. That's just a lot of history just about them exerting the control. The key thing is, even with these the propaganda having different bishops to be with them, the key thing is that even though the Syrian community or the Christian community in Kerala didn't they kind of asked Rome to take out these Roman Portuguese Jesuits, but there became a time where these Portuguese Jesuits came back after these propaganda society, and were sending Italians and other foreign nationals from the Carmelite order to come. And so and that this person comes in, the Archbishop Rubiero, but he was not able to really have great exert much control further, because partly still this Syrian Christians were not really accepting of these foreign bishops being put at them. They wanting one of their native people or an Indian person to be in control. And so and also it says that the Dutch, or this is the time when the Dutch were in control, they were not allowing all these different, they're saying you need to really have a better result in how they're controlling who's going to be in charge, because like we said, the Dutch weren't Catholic. The Dutch at this time are Protestant. And so they're not really looking to support all the different whims of these different Catholic orders and religious orders, being Jesuit or Carmelite or whatnot. They're just saying, just pick one and just let them do as they need. And so that they're more focused on the business side of their relations in India. And so that's how that section really just kind of that's the last thing I just want to kind of say on that section. And finally, we get to the conclusion. I know it's 6 o'clock. I'm just going to wrap it real quickly. This is just a recap of everything that we have. The main thing is up till the 16th century, before the Portuguese come, we know that our church had strong connection because of the missionary work of St. Thomas, as we accounted earlier, and the development of the Catholicate within the Persian church, and having a Persian connection because of their great vast missionary work up until the 12th century, even like we mentioned earlier, going all the way to China. And so the church in Kerala or the church in India had a strong connection to the Persian Nestorian church. we can see that within the history of our church, but also in the history of the world at that time as well. And then even though our church now is more Antiochian practicing or of the Syriac tradition, we know that there is an ancient practice of the Antiochian side also being within the Persian community, within Marfan and Seleucia, or Tikrit, I'm sorry. And so we see that part of our history also being highlighted, or knowing our church can have a connection with the West Syriac tradition even prior to the arrival of Mar Gregorios and Mar Basilios and Mar Ivanios. And then we get to the next era of our church history is the arrival of the Portuguese and their efforts to control and to exert power over the church community, particularly with the highlight with being the Synod of Uriampur and all the different things that we just talked about already today. And then finally, because of all the back and forth with Roman rule and then the Dutch and the community wanting to preserve the ancient heritages, we have now our strong Antioch connection would last to this day, with the arrival of Mar Gregorios of Jerusalem, and then coming with Mar Basilios, Elder Mar Basilios and Mar Ivanios coming later, solidifying the ancient Syriac practice within this West Syrian tradition, or the West Syriac tradition of the community, and that's the standard that we hold as maintaining our ancient faith, not being Roman Catholic, not being Nestorian, not being anything else, but maintaining the Orthodox faith as practiced by the Oriental churches. And from that point forward, our church has maintained that faithfully from that point forward, knowing that though we know that we didn't start out being necessarily West Syriac, but we know that our church from the times of St. Thomas and from the centuries later was a Syriac worshiping community. That's always the common thread that's always been out there, and wanting to maintain the faith and traditions of the ancient West, the Syriac heritages. And now with though we know we're more Persian prior, that didn't necessarily mean that we're always Nestorian, but we know that we had Syriac as our heritage. And so when that became more leaning towards Catholicism, especially when we talked earlier with that Mar Gabriel who came from the Persian church, and then during the time of the Portuguese and the propaganda time, and then he himself also aligning with the Roman Catholics, show that we couldn't rely on that Persian or that East Syriac liturgical tradition, because it's being seen now more as more Catholic, and also for sure also Nestorian, which now had already been kind of seen as something very negative. And so the only other option of maintaining a Syriac heritage, which is also our heritage, but also that's not Catholic and not Nestorian, is West Syriac. And so our church has maintained that faithfully to this day, knowing that that's the foundation for our St. Thomas community, because we know that we're known as St. Thomas Christians, or as the Syriac Christians of India. And so that's what allowed us to maintain our independence and to be able to worship freely within the Eastern form and the Eastern traditions, and to make sure that we can move forward with ourselves. We're not relying on anyone else, but we're able to move forward without any other interference from Western or foreign powers. And so that concludes this book, which is not the whole history of our church, but covers a lot, from the beginnings all the way to the beginnings of our church entering the West Syriac phase of our church history. And that kind of concludes that here. I know it went kind of fast because this is our last class. There was a lot of things, but like I said, this last section repeated a lot of things. And so I just wanted to highlight the main points. You can read more, the details if you'd like, especially I know when you have to write your paper and write your lessons, the thing for the book, for the grade. You can find more of the specific details when reading this lesson. But like I said, hopefully I highlighted the main points, and it was useful or helpful for you to kind of understand all this history that we had. I'll leave it now for, it's already 6 o'clock if there's any questions. If not, we can kind of conclude for today.
Achen, don't see any questions on the chat, so I'm assuming there isn't any. If not, then I'll let Sadoshan to speak a few words.
Okay.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you so much. It was very informative class. You did a very wonderful job, Achen. One of the thing we learned out of this church history. One of the interesting thing. Many our church went through a lot of challenges, lot of persecution, not from other religions, but from the Christianity itself, other churches. So one of the things we learned that how much persecution we had and how much we overcome to come up to this stage. Thank you so much, Achen, for your time and hard working to teach us about the church, the history of the church, and the book, The Church is Growing. Thank you. I'm actually driving to the church.